Welcome to the Celestial Saga channel. Imagine waking up after centuries of peace, thinking everything is under control. But instead of triumph, you meet your enemies who have survived the apocalypse, and now they have come for you. Today we're going to tell you a story that will make you think, is survival always victory? Stay with us. Do you ever feel bad? Lena Blackwood asked, her eyes fixed on the frozen rock that had once been their homeworld. You know what we've done there. Victor Storm, lounging in his chair and sipping a hot drink, didn't respond immediately. Lena tore her gaze away from the lifeless planet and turned to give Victor a questioning look. Not even a little? No, Victor repeated. Victor, a Chinu like Lena, was bipartite with 2 arms and a pair of angular horns, poking out from a thick tangle of green hair. His skin was a deeper shade of red than hers, and his voice had a rough edge to it. It's just business, Lena. I don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on it? Lena's finger pointed at the frozen rock on the view screen. Look at it, Victor. That was a whole world, blue, green, brown, alive, full of life. Thousands of species lived there. Billions of sapiens called it home. Now look at it. Look at what we've done. The planet was now dark, dead, and cold. Centuries without sunlight had frozen every drop of water, leaving the world coated in dull, dirty ice layer upon layer of solid oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide lay on top of the ice. It had once had a breathable atmosphere, but no longer. I see it, Victor said, his tone even, just like I've seen a dozen other worlds before it. You're new to this, Lena Blackwood, so take my advice. Don't think about it. Just do your job. Let the guilt and blame fall on the leaders. They decide who lives and who dies. So, I'm supposed to shift the blame? Lena raised an eyebrow. Tell myself I was just following orders? Exactly, Victor said. Lena shook her head, her brow furrowing. That's not right. Victor leaned back. The creatures down there weren't people, Lena Blackwood. They were predators, omnivores, cruel, vicious beings. It's a good thing we found them when we did a few more centuries, and they would have found us first. They'd have made their way into the void, just like we did. But they wanted to meet us, Lena said. I listened to their transmissions. They wanted to be found. They were curious, excited. They were fools, Victor countered. The void is dangerous. They should have stayed silent, kept their transmissions to themselves. He shook his head. If they had, we wouldn't have found them, and that world would still be green and blue and brown. Lena paused, her hands tense. It's not right. It's just the way things are, Victor said with a dismissive gesture. The primitives were monsters. What we did to them is what they would have done to us. You don't know that, Lena insisted. They might have welcomed us. They might have shared their world. They were predators, Victor said firmly. We've tried coexisting with predators before. Did you forget the Blair? Lena shuddered. The Blair had been a nightmare. They had killed, eaten, and had a disturbing penchant for the flesh of children. Not everyone is like that, Lena argued weakly. Even herbivores are territorial, Victor said. When 2 sapients meet, one of 2 things happens. Either we kill them or they kill us. He placed a hand on her shoulder. It's the way things are. Lena, accept it. Lena sighed, her voice soft. Maybe. It just feels so cold, so cruel, she murmured, staring again at the frozen planet, the way we did it. Victor gave a small smile. Cold is effective, safe, you can survive fire, diseases mutate, automated armies can be stopped or subverted. But cold? Cold is simple, it's safe, and it works. He set his empty cup aside. Enough lazing around. We didn't wake up from stasis to sit here. Time to get to work. The first task was to run a diagnostic on the ship. The bringer of life had been drifting idly in space long enough for the frozen planet to complete 3 full revolutions around its star. Running the diagnostic was simple. Lena and Victor only had to walk to the bridge and tell the computer to initiate it. An hour later, the ship reported back with a clean bill of health. Afterward, Victor went to check on the stasis pods. There were 200,000 Chinu colonists in suspended animation, waiting until the planet was ready for them. The pods were built to be robust and resistant to malfunction, but Victor checked them anyway. After all, 200,000 lives were not something to take lightly. While Victor did that, Lena went to inspect the screen. It was the most critical and delicate of her duties. The screen was a disk, just 4 meters thick, but spanning 200,000 kilometers across. It had been responsible for killing the planet. The disk sat between the planet and the star, absorbing all the heat, light, and radiation that once nourished the world. The screen had been positioned to match Earth's orbit with thrusters, and an automated system kept it in place. It was surrounded by drones and defenses in case the primitives tried to damage or destroy it. They had already launched chemical explosives, fission bombs, and even manned aircraft. None had made it through. The computer reported no damage to the screen, and it hadn't drifted off course. The screen's power reserves were filled to capacity, charged by centuries of solar radiation. All systems were functional. With the diagnostics done, Lena Blackwood and Victor broke for lunch. Their meal consisted of bricks of freeze-dried plant matter. It was nutritious and filling, but only slightly more pleasant to eat than cardboard. Lena resigned herself to the situation. There weren't many types of food that could survive for hundreds of years, and it would be centuries before the planet below her could sustain life again. Fresh food was a luxury she wouldn't see for a long time. "I kind of wish we didn't have to wipe out all the plants on that world," Lena said with a sigh. "I feel like I'd trade a limb just for a basket of fresh produce." Victor chuckled. "You'd probably end up giving up more than that," he replied. "That rock used to be a death world, full of poisons, predators, and pathogens. Even if you found something edible, you'd be dead before you could enjoy it." "At least the drun's good," Lena said, trying to lift her spirits. The drun leaves were meant to be stored dry, and time hadn't taken away from their flavor. A few minutes in boiling water and the drink was as good as any Lena could find back home or on any colony. Feeling reasonably refreshed, Victor and Lena got back to work. Their next task was mostly procedural. Lena ran a scan to check the frozen world for signs of life. As with most of their operations, it was an automated process. Lena only had to input basic commands. The bringer of life's computer systems were as advanced as could be, though they still avoided self-awareness, something the Chinu had learned the hard way. A mixture of boredom and melancholy led Lena to play some human music while she waited for the scan to finish. The bringer of life had recorded as many transmissions as possible before the screen was put in place. The humans had maintained a vast network on their primitive machines, and much of their knowledge had been preserved. Once Earth was properly colonized, a museum would be set up as a tribute to the species that had been sacrificed for the good of the Chinu. The music was called jazz, and the singer was Ella Fitzgerald. Her voice was sweet, soaring, and mournful. Lena couldn't help but regret the loss of the humans. Victor had called them vicious predators, and maybe they were. Maybe they would have killed Lena if given the chance. That didn't change the fact that they had created beautiful things. It didn't change the fact that they would never make anything beautiful again. The scan took hours, far longer than it should have. In the middle of the second hour, Lena grew frustrated and asked Victor about it. He laughed. "If it's not done in 10 minutes, just wait longer," he said. "I don't think it's supposed to take this long," Lena pointed out, clearly annoyed. "It usually doesn't," Victor agreed, but his expression didn't change. "But this is a death world. Just sit tight and listen to your sad music from your dead predators. You'll understand once the scan's done." The computer took another 4 hours to finish scanning and compile the report. At first, Lena skimmed through it half-heartedly, a list of dead species and frozen plant matter. But toward the bottom of the report, something caught her eye, something that filled her with fear. "Victor," she said, her voice steady but filled with concern. Victor Storm wandered onto the bridge a few minutes later, nursing a fresh mug of drun. "The scans are finished," Lena said, pointing at the screen. "Is there life down there? Microbes or something bigger?" Victor sipped his drink nonchalantly. "Both?" Lena nodded. "I cross-referenced the scan with the database the computer compiled from human transmissions. Look." She pointed at the screen. Victor walked over and started reading over her shoulder. "Hydrothermal vents? Little pockets of warmth in a cold, dead world," he said with a shrug. "Not uncommon and easy to deal with." "That's not all," Lena continued. "The whole planet's riddled with little worm things, nematodes, the humans called them. Then there are tardigrades, rapers, and dozens of species of insect eggs that might still be viable." "Is that all?" Victor asked, clearly uninterested. "Is that all?" Lena repeated in disbelief. "The planet's so cold it doesn't even have an atmosphere, and there's enough living biomass left to form its own landmass." Victor gave her a dry look. "I told you it was a death world, didn't I?" "I wasn't talking about the weather or seismic activity," Victor said, taking a seat next to Lena. "Those are things we can handle if necessary. Earth is a death world because of its inhabitants. They've spent millions of years in a constant cycle of competition and extinction, forced to evolve rapidly or perish. Not all those mutations were predator-prey. creatures have found all sorts of ways to survive. There's more, Lena continued. The scan found over 1 billion species of microbes, dormant but not dead. Viruses, Victor guessed. Yes, Lena confirmed, but also fungi, algae, bacteria, all sorts of things. She shook her head. I never imagined so many could survive. It's only a small percentage, Victor pointed out. There were trillions of microbial species before we blocked out the sun. It's still so many, Lena said, and we have no idea if they could affect Chinu biology. True, Victor replied, finishing his drink. Microbes are one of the biggest dangers when colonizing a new world. He paused. Fortunately, there's a simple solution. Lena frowned. What is it? Victor set his mug down. One of the other functions of the screen, he said, though it's not one we use often. But death worlds require extreme measures. Lena's eyes widened as Victor continued. Extreme measures indeed, Victor repeated. The screen has over 300 years worth of solar radiation stored. We're going to release it all in a bit. In a few weeks, the screen will discharge enough energy to evaporate Earth's atmosphere and every drop of water on the planet, the entire surface. The entire world would soon become a swirl of boiling molten rock. Flash boiling the planet was no simple task. It would violently strip away Earth's atmosphere and the water would be ejected into space. To prevent this, the Bringer of Life deployed thousands of force field emitters. These emitters surrounded the planet, connecting their fields to form a barrier. The barrier would trap the superheated gases, preventing them from escaping. As usual, Lena and Victor didn't have to do much more than give commands to the computer, which handled the rest of the process. It took 15 days to position the force field array, followed by an hour of testing and diagnostics. Satisfied with this setup, Victor told Lena to watch the view screen while he sent the activation command to the screen. The screen didn't glow with visible light. The energy was strictly focused, bearing down on the planet like a laser. Lena couldn't see the light itself, but she saw the result, a line of steam and light stretching nearly 100 kilometers across the planet, reaching from pole to pole. The screen will fire continuously for the next 36 days, Victor told Lena. Earth's rotation will ensure every inch of it gets scorched. Everything trapped in the ice will die, along with anything less than half a kilometer below the surface. Do you think there might be anything deeper than that? Lena asked. Victor shrugged. If there is, there's nothing we can do about it from here. Melting the surface should seal off any cave systems for now. We can send drones to dig down and investigate once the Chinu forming begins. For the next few days, Lena and Victor watched the planet burn. At first, it was fascinating, hypnotic even, but after a few days, Lena became utterly bored. Victor suggested she go back into stasis, promising to stay awake long enough to make sure Earth became a boiling rock with no life left. Lena refused. Protocol dictated they stay together, partly for safety, but mostly because she didn't want Victor to be alone. She knew Chinu were very much herd animals, and no one liked being alone for too long. They kept each other company, though the days were dull. Victor kept the conversation going with stories from his past. He'd overseen the death and colonization of 12 worlds and remembered the days of the Chinu herd group from over 1,000 years before Lena had been born. On the 36th day, Earth glowed a bright yellowish orange. Lena remarked that she'd never seen anything so beautiful and so ugly at the same time. Victor snorted. The screen has finished discharging its energy, he said, sending the command for it to relocate. The screen is so massive that its gravity field has affected Earth's orbit. We need to reposition it to offset that change. In another 300 years, the screen will be recharged and ready to move on to another solar system. Lena, too busy enjoying her drink, didn't respond right away. She simply nodded. Victor continued. Now that the command's been given, we don't need to stay awake to oversee it. We'll go back into stasis once you're done with your drink. Lena nodded again, but Victor stopped her. There's one more thing, he said. Once this is over and the colony's established, you'll be staying behind. Lena shot upright in surprise. What? It's nothing personal, Victor said. You've been doing a fine job, and your company's pleasant. He leaned over and placed a comforting hand on her leg. But you care too much. This job isn't for you. I can do it, Lena protested. I am doing it. How can you say that? Victor shook his head. How much human music have you been listening to? Lena paused, then replied, Not that much. Why? Victor's voice softened. You're having nightmares, Lena. And I know you cry when you think I'm not around. No, I don't, Lena lied quickly. You care too much, Victor said again. And there's no shame in that, but there's a reason not many of us can do what I do. Lena sighed. It's the humans. I can't stop thinking about what we did to them. It had to be done, Victor said, though his words seemed hollow. I know, Lena snapped, though the anger faded as quickly as it came. She sighed again. I know, it's just, they saw it coming, Victor. We blocked out their sun, and they knew what was happening. They tried to stop it, but they couldn't. Every single human had to look up at the sky and know they were going to die. They knew they'd freeze to death in the dark. She choked on her words and wiped away a sniffle. That's what I did to them. That's what I'm talking about. Victor's hand clapped on her leg before he withdrew it. He leaned back in his chair, an odd expression on his face. Did you know you're my fourth partner? Lena didn't trust herself to speak. She shook her head. The work we do isn't difficult in the traditional sense, Victor continued. It doesn't require hard labor or expertise. The problem is the emotional toll. We're herd animals, Lena. We have a great deal of empathy, even for things we shouldn't. He gestured at the molten planet on the view screen, especially for things we shouldn't. You don't seem to have a problem, Lena pointed out. I'm different, Victor said. I was born with a rare condition. I don't experience empathy. Lena chuckled, though it was an odd joke. She'd accept it if it broke the tension. No, I'm serious, Victor told her. I feel nothing for the humans, or for you. My only concern is myself. Victor looked at her, and the animation slipped from his face. His eyes were cold, lifeless, the eyes of a predator. A tremor of fear crawled up Lena's legs. Victor, her voice came out as a whimper. Victor blinked, and his expression returned to normal. Oh, I can play the part well enough. He flashed Lena a reassuring smile. But Lena wasn't reassured. The smile twisted into something else. But I don't crave the comfort of the herd. I don't share your joy or pain. I am a monster, Lena. And I am comfortable with that. I treat my kind ethically because it gets me what I want. But I could kill you and feel nothing if the situation called for it. Lena believed him. She found herself instinctively pulling away from him. Now, there's no need for that, Victor said, his voice softening. You're perfectly safe. I'm as fond of you as I'm capable of being, and I wouldn't be telling you this if I weren't trying to help. I don't see how knowing you're a secret predator helps, Lena said, her voice tight. Because a predator is what this job requires, Victor explained. Forming a new colony requires murder on a scale beyond what most Chinu can comprehend. Most people in our position are like me, the few who aren't either become callous or kill themselves. He pointed at her. You don't have it in you to become callous. Your only hope is to stay behind, help build a new life with the other colonists, take comfort in the herd, and accept as much therapy as you can stand. Lena tried to imagine building a life from the ashes of the world she had destroyed. I don't think I can do that. Victor leaned in, his voice becoming colder. Then you can go somewhere else. I don't care. But you're not coming with me. Your career in world colonization is over. He leaned forward, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Do you understand? Lena swallowed. Would Victor really kill her now? She didn't know, and she didn't want to find out. She nodded. She wasn't sure she wanted to go on another mission with him anyway. In fact, she wasn't sure she wanted to finish the one she was on. Good, Victor said, his smile returning like nothing had happened. Let's get back into stasis. It'll be a few decades before the planet cools down. Going into stasis felt a lot like falling asleep. The pod was surprisingly comfortable, encasing her in a metal tube. The tube administered a sedative before initiating the stasis process, and Lena Blackwood drifted off. When she woke, she felt rested. She didn't feel as though she'd been in suspended animation for decades, even though that's exactly what had happened. Chinu technology focused heavily on comfort and ease of use. Lena didn't think about it often, but now and then, she noticed and appreciated it. The Earth was cool. The force field still surrounded it, though it was no longer necessary. The atmosphere was stable, and the planet's water had recondensed into oceans, rivers, ice, and clouds. A weather system had formed with wind and snow. Earth was starting to resemble a homeworld again. Of course, it was a lie. The oceans held water and salt, nothing else. The ground was solid rock, unsuitable for plant life. Earth was as dead now as it had been decades ago. Still, it looked clean, new. The cities and monuments of the humans had all melted down, and all traces of their once great civilization had been scoured from the face of the planet. Lena doubted a single bone or trinket remained to remember them by. She wasn't sure how she felt about that. Once again, Lena and Victor ran diagnostics. After confirming everything was in working order, Lena scanned the planet one more time. She confirmed there was no life, not so much as a microbe. "That's what I like to hear," Victor said. "I'm not sure what we would have done if something had survived all of that." "Has that ever happened?" Lena asked. She couldn't imagine anything surviving after being frozen for hundreds of years, then dumped into molten rock. "No," Victor replied, his tone serious. "But it's a death world. You can never be too careful." Victor had seemed frighteningly normal all day. It was as though their previous conversation had never happened. Lena didn't know if he was putting on an act or if he really wasn't bothered about firing on the planet and threatening to kill her. She decided not to ask. If Victor wanted to pretend everything was fine, Lena was happy to play along. Victor had the force field emitters returned to the bringer of life. Lena searched the world for a suitable landing spot. She wasted almost an hour zooming in on the sensors before remembering to have the ship's computer find a landing zone for her. The bringer of life charted a course. It took just over 2 weeks to arrive. The ship set down gently in a large, flat space, a few dozen kilometers from what used to be a mountain range. The mountains were much shorter now, round lumps that had melted into each other under the heat of the screen. There was a river a few kilometers away. It looked nice. The ground wasn't flat enough for Victor. He had the ship's weapons carve away the rock until there was a perfectly level 70-kilometer circle of ground. While he was at it, he carved a depression into the section of rock where the river ran through, forming a lake. The process took another 2 days, but Victor insisted. When it was done, the bringer of life sat gently in the space that had been prepared for it. Lena and Victor ran another round of diagnostics. The scans confirmed that the landing had caused no damage to the ship. Now, it was time to begin the Chinu forming process. It was a delicate, complicated procedure, but all Lena had to do was instruct the computer to start. A swarm of drones streamed out from the bringer of life. The drones seeded the rocks around the ship with fungus. The fungus was designed to spread quickly and break down the stone into soil. More drones deposited plant life and microbes into the oceans. Like plankton, the aquatic life would multiply rapidly, converting large amounts of carbon dioxide into oxygen. For the next 3 centuries, the bringer of life would slowly add more and more complex life, building ecosystems until the world was capable of supporting Chinu life and agriculture. When it was finished, Earth would become a garden world. Lena looked forward to seeing it, though Victor remained relaxed and friendly throughout the entire process. However, Lena didn't forget their earlier conversation. He made her nervous now, and though she was certain he noticed, Victor said nothing. He waved at her and wished her a good nap as they climbed back into their stasis pods. Lena let out a sigh as the sedative took hold. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe she really wasn't cut out for a life as an exterminator. When Lena woke up, she felt rested. She stretched, yawned, and rolled over, preparing to climb out of her pod. But then she froze. She was surrounded. There were people in the stasis chamber, lots of them. No, it couldn't be. People weren't supposed to be here. These weren't people at all. They were something else, something worse. Lena heard shouting from the pod next to hers. It was Victor. "Computer, activate security, kill the intruders." Lena heard the stomp of feet and the thud of limbs striking flesh. "Computer, kill them!" Victor shouted again. "Kill the humans!" Another thud. Victor was coughing. Lena was too terrified to move. She watched the humans in front of her. They were huge. The smallest was at least a head and shoulders taller than her. Their bodies were lean, hard, and they carried a sharp, musky scent. The smell prickled every hair on Lena's body. She'd never smelled a predator before, but somehow she knew this was the smell of one. It filled her with a primal fear, a fear that morphed into horror when she saw their eyes. The humans' eyes were sharp, cruel, unblinking. Their gaze was filled with a hate so raw and powerful that Lena nearly soiled herself. Those eyes promised death, worse than death. Lena was so transfixed that she barely noticed the muffled screams of her partner. The humans weren't armed, but some carried cords. They were wearing void suits like Lena's. One of them, a vicious-looking female, picked up a chair with one hand. She set it down in front of her. The human hissed one word. "Sit." Lena blinked. The female hadn't used a human word. She'd spoken Lena's language, The sound of it sent a shockwave through the herbivore. Lena soiled herself. Victor was still struggling, but Lena wanted to look, wanted to help. Yet she was too terrified to move. "Lena, run!" Victor called out. It was good advice. Lena desperately wanted to run, to escape, but her body refused to obey. "Sit!" the human commanded again. Lena's body was still locked in place, but it wasn't still anymore. She trembled, her eyes watering. She heard a soft whimper, only to realize it was her own. The human glared at her for a moment longer, then spoke in the human tongue. "Two humans, advance." Lena tried to flee, but fear held her in place. Hands grabbed her, strong, rough. The terror that had frozen the Chinu surged, propelling her into action. She screamed, kicked, and tried to bite. The humans lifted her from the pod and slammed her onto the deck. The impact knocked the air from Lena's lungs. For precious seconds, her body wouldn't respond. By the time she regained her breath, it was too late. The humans had bound her hands behind her back. Her panicked wriggling failed to stop them from seizing her flailing legs. They tied those together as well. The humans lifted her again and dropped her into the chair the female had set out. More cords looped around her, tying her in place. Lena continued her futile resistance, screaming her hopeless screams. But no one was coming. Lena and Victor were the only ones running the ship. All the colonists were in their own compartments. The ship might have been able to hear them, but it hadn't responded to Victor's commands. They were alone. The humans set the chair down against a bulkhead. More humans set Victor down next to Lena. He was tied to a chair, beaten but alive. He glared at the monsters, matching their own hate with a cold fury. The female human pulled out another chair and set it down in front of them. She straddled it, sitting the wrong way around. The other humans closed in around their leader, a wall of flesh that cut off all hope of escape. Lena began to cry. The human waited, watching her with calm fury and contempt. When she judged Lena had calmed down enough, she spoke. "This is a nice ship. Your computer is very helpful." Victor kept silent, his gaze murderous. Lena blinked in confusion. "What?" "It even taught us your language," the human continued. "Your species places a lot of emphasis on comfort, doesn't it?" "How are you alive?" Victor rasped. The predator ignored the question. "Everything on this ship is easy, user-friendly," the human said. "Genetically engineered, low-maintenance crops, no predators, no bugs, nothing that can threaten a Chinu in any way." The human shook her head. "You've never been in danger. You've never faced real adversity. I doubt you've ever had a hard day's work." Lena quailed. "How do you know my name?" "The problem," the human continued, as if Lena hadn't spoken, "is that adversity is what makes you grow. It makes you think about things." She gestured toward the stasis pods. "For example, a person who's experienced danger would never leave an entire spaceship unguarded for centuries, not even if she thought she was alone." The human raised a finger. She definitely wouldn't leave her computer programs accessible to other species. "We killed you," Victor growled. "Frozen you to death. Burned your world. How are you here?" 9 years, the human answered flatly. "We saw you enter our solar system 9 years before you blocked out the sun." "So you called for help?" Victor demanded. "Who helped you?" His eyes narrowed. "Was Earth just a colony?" "No one helped us," the human said, her voice steady. "We were excited at first, before we realized what you were doing. Humanity celebrated that we weren't alone in the universe. It took nearly a week before we figured out you planned to kill us all." "You would have done the same to us," Victor said. "Would we?" The predator leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "Or is that just what you told yourselves while you took the easiest option? We could have been friends. We could have learned from each other, made each other better." "But you didn't think to try," she continued. "You chose genocide because it was easy, because you could." The human crossed her arms, resting her chin on them as she sat in the chair. "We tried talking to you. We negotiated. We reasoned. We begged. But you didn't hear a word. You programmed your ship to kill us and then you went to sleep." Victor's face hardened. "You shouldn't have done that, Victor. If you'd stayed awake, we might have worked things out." Lena asked, still trembling. "Why didn't you die?" The human grimaced. "We had 9 years." She took a breath. "We tried to stop you, of course, but that's not all we did. We knew you wanted to freeze us out, so we dug deep into the earth, as deep as we could go. We found places that would stay warm, places we could use geothermal energy. We used as much technology as we could salvage. We did the best we could with the time we had. Most of it failed," she continued. "Some weren't deep enough, Some weren't hermetically sealed, some were lost to equipment failure or seismic activity, and some people went mad and killed each other. The human paused. It's been nearly 700 years since you destroyed our world. Only 4 of our underground habitats survived that long. 20,000 humans, that's all that's left, Victor spat. That's 20,000 more than there should be. We'll rebuild, the human said, her voice steady. It will take centuries, but we'll do it. We'll reverse engineer your technology, and maybe that will take even longer. But we will rebuild. We'll take what you've done to us, and we'll use it. We'll become stronger than you ever imagined, and we will make you pay. Her knuckles went white as she gripped the back of the chair. You took everything from us, so we'll take everything from you. She leaned forward, baring her teeth. We know where your worlds are. We know your defenses, and we know how we're going to kill every single one of you. You will fail, Victor said. The human smiled coldly. Like I said, your computer was very helpful. We killed 200,000 of you and no signal has been sent. You're not going to succeed. She smiled again viciously. Besides, we're not going to kill you. Lena looked up, confused. You took everything from us, the human repeated. So we'll take everything from you, specifically you. It will take centuries, but we'll let you sleep as long as it takes. When you wake up, you'll be the last of your kind. The woman stood, her expression cold and triumphant. Lena sobbed. Victor was right. The humans were predators, monsters. But Lena was also right. She had murdered a world. And the worst thing was that the human was right too. That's what made it so much worse. That the humans deserved their revenge, and Lena's people deserved to die. No, Lena whispered, her voice shaking. The human gestured at the predators around her. Rough hands grabbed Lena, while another human unbound her from the chair. No, you can't, Lena pleaded. Victor continued struggling, but the humans overpowered him easily. He called out to the ship, begging it to kill the humans. The ship didn't respond. Lena screamed, cried, and begged. The humans didn't stop. They placed her back in the stasis pod. The leader of the humans smiled down at her. Goodbye, Lena. You won't see me again, but I want you to know I'll treasure this moment. Sleep well. The pod closed. Lena kept screaming. She didn't stop until the darkness overtook her.